I thought what was interesting was watching this, right? Because I've made fun of some old pregame shows almost always as it relates to CBS, but I actually got to see some of the Fox one because I'm just not watching that stuff anymore. I find it makes my head hurt very often, but when you have no other options, all of a sudden you're watching a pregame show.
Is Terry Bradshaw okay?
He's got a cane. He's got a cane. I don't know what the procedure was.
Didn't you get a knee replacement? That's what I recall, but I could be wrong.
He's also talked publicly and before most and was confusing to people the same way Robin Williams was confusing to people about depression, given that he's got an outsized personality, is colorful. And Fox spent a lot of time, an inordinate amount of time, telling America on Sunday that you could win a suitcase full of cash from Terry Bradshaw. This is a very big promotion. He is still a star, very highly paid star. Terry Bradshaw on that show was ahead of the curve talking about mental health publicly. And you mentioned Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley told people when they asked a couple of weeks ago, he just missed a game, he said, none of your business, which is inaccurate because literally it is the business of reporters to find out why one of the star players can't play. I understand why that would be his reaction. But the thing I was interested in watching the pregame show was Jay Glazer talking to Lane Johnson about mental illness, and then these men specifically trying to talk about this publicly. Michael Strahan saying, I've been friends with Jay Glazer for 30 years. I did not know that he struggled with this. You look at Jay Glazer and all the things that he embodies about masculinity and fighting and everything else. And he was saying off of the Lane Johnson interview, look, this isn't about muscles and manhood. We need to talk about this stuff. And then it went over to Jimmy Johnson, and Jimmy didn't seem equipped for this conversation. Jimmy just said it's important that people love you, but he didn't have very much for this conversation. And I can't imagine that people like Jimmy would, even though Jimmy's son has struggled with addiction. You get to a certain age as a football coach, specifically, I wondered how Jimmy Johnson in the middle of that was absorbing all of this. What are people doing talking about their feelings all the time? Like, what are they doing on this group of men?
What are feelings?
This group of men talking about their feelings. And I thought, wow, that is a seismic shift in the way that this is talked about, that it has made its way over to this place where these guys are talking openly about a thing that would have that had so much shame around it that Strahan, Glazer's friend for 30 years, didn't know that Jay struggled with this until a couple of weeks ago.
I appreciate them, even if it's clumsy, talking about it in ways that destigmatize it, because a couple of years ago, it doesn't seem like Calvin Ridley would have done something like this. The support wouldn't have been there. We just would have all been saying, what's going on with Calvin Ridley? What a disappointing season. Is this on Arthur Smith? What the hell is going on with this player? And now you have an answer for it. It's just very hard for football people, or people in general, to discuss something that they can't see, something that's intangible. It's a lot easier to talk about turf toe.
It is easier also to not talk about it, because how do you explain guy missing 2 NFL games?
Right.
And there's not anything wrong with his body. Like, you don't see in that sport, you don't see very often a guy having an ailment that doctors aren't ruling him out. You saw what Arians said about Gronkowski, right? He said he shouldn't have been out there, but he kept begging me to play. What the hell does Gronkowski need to be playing in New Orleans for? Why does Gronkowski need to be playing on AstroTurf in the middle of one of the best tight end careers we've ever seen, when they only need him for touchdowns at the end of the season?
Headed into a bye week. I mean,
but like, what you understand? You understand what I'm saying, though?
Yes,
the mentality of
why is Bruce Arians letting him play and dictate whether or not he's going to play?
Well,
that should be Arians' decision, not Rob Gronkowski's.
What Gronk looked like at the first few weeks of the season was so shockingly quick and spry that you got so used to seeing him just labor down the field with sprockets flying out of his body that you figure, wow, this is what Gronk looks like healthy. He looks like Gronk at 27 years old. And then in that Rams game that he played at, where he took vicious shot after vicious shot, he was hurt very clearly on the first one, tried to play through it. You already saw him slowing down. And then this game on Sunday against the Saints, where he looked like the guy that he looked like for the past 2 times we've seen him play a football season for a team. Just slower, sprockets flying out. Once again, it's a very easy tell. If you see a spring or sprocket fly out of him, he's not healthy.
it is amazing how almost imperceptible some of this stuff is, right, Stugotz? Because Patrick Mahomes doesn't look physically like he's moving around the same way, that he's faster than everyone else. That it doesn't, it seems a little more labored, does it not? Mike mentioned turf toe. He had turf toe, and it's a debilitator. But the mind is a debilitator that in football has never been allowed to be injured. You can't not be counted on, Stugotz, to, in that sport, be there by your teammate's side. And I do wonder how this goes over in these locker rooms where I did not ever think that these locker rooms would be equipped for some of the stuff that is happening around the world that is infiltrating that locker room. I thought this locker room, this one in this sport, because of the culture, you play, you tough through it, go get the needles, you beg to play, Rob Gronkowski, even though it's weak. Look, what are you doing? You're Gronkowski.
There's some pie next week.
Your body hurts. Take
play. They have O.J. Howard. It's fine.
They've got Cameron.
He wants to play, man.
I know, but
3 deep at this position. You're good.
You're 3 deep at that position.
I know Antonio Brown's out, but they put Godwin in the slot.
Yeah.
It's insane. And the Calvin Ridley thing, to take it back to him, it made sense. It made sense. Just if you've watched him this season, he looks like a different player. Something's not right, to the point I'm like, is this guy hurt? What's going on?
But I have
the
more
mysterious
questions,
absence
Mike.
in London.
Julio Jones isn't there.
I mean, Julio Jones missed a lot of time, and Calvin Ridley was dynamic. We had a conversation about the Falcons offense a few weeks ago. I would take Calvin Ridley today over Julio Jones. Well, today is a little bit loaded because I don't know if I'm ever going to see Calvin Ridley play football again. I assume so. But Calvin Ridley was a better wide receiver by the time Julio Jones departed.
But maybe there were more people, more guys in the NFL dealing with mental illness than what we thought, and so it's more acceptable now because they're understanding of it. Like, hey, it's okay if you have to leave me. I've been through it as well, and so perhaps we were off, right?
But when you're saying more understandable, it's not like it's not shocking that Calvin Ridley has just put up his hand and said, I can't deal with this. I'm leaving in the middle of the season. It's not like you're seeing it all over the league. Like, however acceptable or understandable you think it is, I'm still surprised to see a guy raise his hand and say, nope, I'm the number 1 receiver on this team. You saw it in watching too much of that Atlanta game. All they have is throw to Pitts. Throw to Pitts, throw to Pitts, throw to Pitts.
But you're seeing it in sports where Osaka is walking away from her sport at the height of her powers.
Yeah, but
you are seeing
individual sports where you're responsible for only yourself is a totally different pressure.
Kevin Love did also leave a game. We didn't know what was going on. The stigma is starting to whittle away some, but it's still very stigmatized.
I think it's significant. You mentioned Osaka, and Simone Biles to me was a watershed moment where the biggest star in the history of gymnastics is recusing herself during the Olympics, the biggest event. If you're a football player who's hidden his mental challenges, you look at that and you go, "Wow, Simone Biles, I need to check myself." And I think we're going to see more and more of this. The Lane Johnsons, the Calvin Ridleys. I think it's going to become more and more common for mental health breaks during seasons.
Talking about it publicly is several exit ramps before. The pressure of the huddle to be there for the guy next to you. Osaka's affecting her sport and Osaka. Biles was playing she was competing in team competition, so it became country and team as well. The reason I'm bringing it up in this sport is, and maybe Calvin Ridley will be an indicator, but it's uncommon in this sport. It's one thing. It was stunning.
It's the ultimate team sport.
It was stunning enough for me to watch Jimmy Johnson, Jay Glazer, Mike Strahan, and Terry Bradshaw try to talk about it.
Right.
It's another thing entirely for a guy who is counted on by that team and feels the pressure and the burden of that to raise his hand and say, my mind's not right, in a sport where guys are taking shots because their bodies are in pain. Like, I want to make stated clear, I do think it's strong. I do think that good for Calvin Ridley. I don't think it's just going to be understandable in the culture of that violent sport. I think there are going to be a lot of obstacles before the next guy is willing to raise his hand in the games that matter that much week to week. and gives up his paycheck, I don't think it's going to be the most common thing.
There is going to be a lot of toughen up. There already is. But the thing is, Calvin Ridley, if you look at the timeline, did try to tough it out. He did try to play through it. They went to London. He skipped that game. They had the bye week. He played against Miami, caught a touchdown, but didn't look like Calvin Ridley of last year. Struggled in the passing game a little bit, and then just decided, I tried to give it a go. I can't. I'm not my best self right now.
I know it's an individual sport, but Marty Fish's story is an amazing story where the man could not get out of his car, could not play against Roger Federer. And it's an individual sport. He had reached the pinnacle of his sport, the match he had been waiting for his entire life. And because of what he was going through mentally, could not get out of the car to play the biggest match of his life. And so I wonder what the reaction will be, both from within the team and outside the team, if we arrive at a Super Bowl where one of the best players says, hey, you know what? The anxiety is so
We've
bad,
seen it
I
before,
can't
though.
play with Barrett Robbins. I wonder what the reaction would be
and
now.
His teammates
Right.
crushed him in
Right.
the locker room after
Yes.
the game. He had a bipolar meltdown
Yeah.
and went drinking all weekend in Mexico and still struggles with it the way that Delonte West is struggling with it, where he's getting arrested claiming he's better at basketball than LeBron James and that he's Jesus Christ as his life. And a lot of people have tried to help Delonte West so much, and he's clearly unwell.
And Barrett Robbins was a center, right? He was a center. I think the reaction would be different now, but imagine if it's a wide receiver, a skill position
But
guy.
you don't have to.
Before the biggest game ever and says, hey, you know what? Mentally, I'm not right. Can't do it.
What I would say to you guys is after Calvin Ridley says none of your business, we have learned you guys really don't like the media. The media in general has a very bad Q rating. When Calvin Ridley says to the media, none of your business, I'm guessing most people in most circumstances like hearing person X tell the media, none of your business. But I got a bunch of questions about,
Does he have to answer
no,
him,
but
though?
maybe it's not. Maybe it is not any of my business. But when your contract pays you to be a professional person who gets paid to show up, and now you are saying I can't work, I ask you, the audience, I ask everyone talking about this today, I ask you this question: what is our business there? Is he allowed to take fame on his terms and be like, you know what, I just can't do it. Please mind my privacy or mind your business.
I think this is such a difficult thing to talk about, and sometimes you're experiencing things and you don't know how to articulate them, what it is you're going through. It's tricky. It's a tricky one.
I think he'd be pushing away an ally if he just said, well, I have personal matters. I don't know the tone of how he said none of your business. He did say that he was out for a personal matter. The second he cites mental health, he would get nothing but understanding and respect from the media. In terms of allies around him, I'm sure he has allies in that locker room, but the media would be so understanding.
He
of
mone
that.
not feel that way if it's mind your business, though,
I
Mike,
mean,
because
he could be-
there
this
is
is-
tone. There is.
yeah.
I'm reading it. I didn't hear it. I'm reading it. But mind your business doesn't get, none of your business or mind your business doesn't get said without tone.
If he's going something, particularly if he's going something for the first time in his life, you could look at a lot of things that he says and scratch your head at it, because someone might be manic in that situation and not recognize their own behavior as they're just learning about a new part of themselves.
But this is where I'm telling you, Mike, this is the spot right there. Well, do you want to normalize it? And I'm not talking to Calvin Ridley here. I'm just talking about how we talk about it, because I'm watching on that pregame show and they were just talking about it. They weren't actually talking about it. What Mike just said, manic, bipolar, you don't know where you are, who you are. You don't recognize yourself. You think you're bulletproof because you're on the high end of bipolar, or you think you're suicidal because you're on the low end of bipolar, and you don't recognize yourself.
This is speculative. I'm saying, like, manic can be bipolar. Manic can just also be like, oh, I can't stand by the actions of who I was when I was going.
I'm not diagnosing him. I'm just saying, when I see Richard Sherman behaving what seemed like out of character and then apologizing profusely as his family stands by his side,
Right.
I wonder where, because Kevin Love said panic attacks and humanized it. When we talk about this stuff, the details, to normalize it, the details have to be spoken plainly. Like, they have to, You need some of these
Easier
details.
said than done, though,
No,
right?
No, and I'm not saying it is
Right.
any of our business as it relates specifically to Calvin Ridley. I'm just telling you, are we going to talk about it? Like, for real talk about it? Or are we just going to keep inching into the conversation very slowly and saying, well, it feels good to talk about my feelings. It feels good. Or are we going to have the conversation about where mental health becomes such a detriment that you need to choose walking away from football because X, Y, Z, this is where I am mentally? How much are we entitled to is what I'm asking the audience and asking everybody listening to this.
I think it's entirely a personal decision. I don't need to know what someone's going through. I don't think, like, if they want to open up and help, destigmatize it, that's fine. But that's not someone's burden to do that who's going through it. I think that's the burden of other people who are witnessing people go through mental health to help destigmatize. Like, the burden should not be on Calvin Ridley to explain himself and what he's going through to make other people have empathy for him.
Echo that sentiment. And Calvin Ridley didn't outline what he was going through. Maybe he's still trying to figure out what he's going through.
You might
right
not
now.
know. That's what I was trying to say.
If he came out and said, I have, excuse me, $5 fine. I have anxiety. I have depression. There are people that, even in sports media, that can weigh in on their own personal experiences and continue to normalize the conversation. But he's decided to keep it entirely private. I don't know if that's the case within that locker room. I don't know what steps the Falcons took after that game in London to tend to his needs. A lot of NFL teams have resources that they didn't have a couple of years ago. But when they come out with such a blanket statement that doesn't give any detail, you just have to put your hands up and respect the space, I think.
I would think part of the healing for a mental health issue is being open about it. I would think that's part of the solution is Lane Johnson not saying I'm missing 2 or 3 weeks by some made up ankle tweak, but because I need the time off for my own mental health. I would have to think that's a healing thing to do.
Yeah, but you decide who you want to be open to, discuss it with. You don't have to discuss it with complete strangers and please the media. You decide that on your own, right? With something this serious.
Yeah, I think
you talk to a psychiatrist, you talk to your loved ones, you talk to your family, you talk to people you trust. They certainly don't need to speak to us about it.
No, to the media, you're right. But by extension, I think fans are willing to be very open and receptive to this kind of a thing. I don't think fans are receptive to what Ben Simmons is doing, but I think fans are very receptive to Calvin Ridley. If he comes out and says, I got a big weight on me,
well, wait a
and I
minute,
need
Ben
to get rid of it.
Simmons' last statements on this front or I can't deal with this. Now, you can question it from whichever angle you want, but his last statement on this, after all of the other obstacles were put in there that now make people form what their opinions are on Ben Simmons, he went to his teammates and said, I cannot mentally do this right now. That is what he said.
He did after a time, but initially it was just, I want to be traded, I refuse to play, but before it got to that.
This is how I want to discuss this with you guys, though, because on addiction and sobriety, recovering addicts do often get relief from sharing their story, helping others, make people feel less alone. When you guys say all of this should be up to the individual, and I agree with you, it should be, but you're not really talking about it then in ways that normalize it or humanize it, and to each his own. I'm not here to say that I deserve all of your private pain. But if you want to be an advocate, if you want to be an activist, if you want to be what DeMar DeRozan and Kevin Love did in terms of normalizing this, I remember talking about this with Keon Dooling, Stugotz, because you mentioned Marty Fish. We're going to talk to him in a South Beach session about some of this stuff, that match in particular, in the coming month. And we're also going to, Meadowlark Media is doing a project that we'll tell you more about later that involves the Penn State sports scandal of our lifetime and the damage that sexual abuse left on one kid after everyone left, the cameras left, all justice, quote unquote, was meted out. Joe Paterno died, and there was no real healing. So if what you're saying is we're ready for this conversation, then one of the things you have to be ready for is, hey, I was sexually abused. Like Keon Dooling talks about this stuff, and it really damaged me in ways that are profound, and I don't know that men or men in sports are there yet. There's been a lot of progress made on that front, but addicts have arrived in a place, again, generalizing, but can talk about this to help others we're not quite there yet in the way we talk about this. We're still talking about it.
But maybe eventually Calvin Ridley will be that guy. But Dan, his obligation right now is to himself, to heal himself first, to figure out what exactly it is that he's feeling. And then maybe he'll be the guy to articulate it correctly.
Oh, no, but he hasn't
and we can have the conversation. Someone, I would imagine, along the way is going to be able to articulate, hey, this is what I'm going through on a daily basis, where we'll be able to have that conversation. I just don't know if it will be Ridley.
Well, but Ridley hasn't put himself out there as an advocate for this. He seems very, very reluctant.
Yes.
But you mentioned Osaka, and I tie it back to what it is that Cody just said about Simmons. Well, he did it this way, the wrong way, with trades and stuff at the beginning. Well, so did Osaka. Like, Osaka has bothered plenty of people with the way that she's doing it, no matter how much support she is getting, because she has the audacity to then show up dressed up at the Met Gala. And then there are plenty of people who are like, well, wait, what happened to Depressed? What happened to get the cameras away from me? It ain't quiet.
No.
Like you guys say, the media is going to applaud, and maybe the media was, but we started here with me telling you, people listening to this kind of hate the media and think the media is too liberal. And there's a whole division in this country based on people who think the media is lying to them and doesn't like how political and racial and biased the media is.
You got into a little bit of that, in particular, the optics of presumably acting normally in air quotes, when your life is in a bit of peril. Rob Lowe talked about this. I appear like I'm an extrovert, but I'm truly introverted. I have anxiety when I go out, but people expect a certain thing of me. It's very hard for someone that has never been directly impacted by mental health struggles or indirectly by someone close in their family to wrap their brain around someone saying, I don't have time to talk to the media after a tennis match, but I'll take photos dressed to the nines in front of that very same media at the Met Gala. Stop trying to apply what is your perception of common logic to these things. But it's totally intangible.
But this is how you normalize it. This is how you normalize it and how you humanize it. And again, I am with everything. I'm not going to be out here saying, "Hey, Ridley, your pain, you got to give it to me. You got to give it to the grief eater. Grief eater needs the pain." But if you want to have this conversation in a way that people can understand with compassion, Osaka or Ben Simmons or anybody, but I'm guessing a whole lot of sports fans, anytime this makes an appearance in a time that's inconvenient, it's going to be like, "Oh, really? Now your mental health is a problem, Ben Simmons. Now, after everything else that you've done that would indicate." It would indicate mental frailty, Stugatz, like in a way that we've rarely seen. Doesn't want to shoot. Basketball player doesn't want to shoot. What is going on with his mind? Now you got to do it a way I like. But you got to do it the way that I prefer.
I don't think that people, excuse me, unless you understand.
$5.
I know that's $5. My God, where's Mike's $5?
He said $5.
But where is it? I mean, saying it and putting it down on the table are two very different things.
Yeah,
here's my $5,
Put it
Ski.
in the fine bucket. I only had $1.
I was going to say, people aren't going to understand even if it's explained. Hey, press conference, I get anxiety. I just do. I can't explain it. I don't know what happens to me. I go to the Met Gala, I'm totally comfortable. People will never be able to understand it unless they've been through it. They'll never be able to fully understand what that feels like. And I'm not certain she could properly articulate it.
But the bridge gets gulfed by the talking about it, the humanization, the normalization. That's fine. Some people are going to set out compassion. Some people are going to have limits on what their empathy can be. But in order to get them to understand it, droplets here and there. But Simone Biles starting a conversation. Lane Johnson talking about it. Jay Glazer and Jimmy Johnson talking about it. Michael Strahan not knowing that his friend had a darkness in his life for 30 years because men conceal it.
Even if people don't want to label it as mental health, I think anybody listening to my voice right now would acknowledge that they have had good days and bad days. They may describe it as moody. Who knows what they describe it as? But when you're struggling with mental health, you'll have good days and bad days. And also, you don't know what the person did to their body to make it appear like it was a good day. Things like alcohol and caffeine, they have adverse effects later on and actually make things like anxiety and depression worse. But if you're smiling in front of photogs at the Met Gala in that moment, you have no idea what that person is doing to either self-medicate or if they're just generally riding a pretty decent vibe that day and the next morning is, air quotes, bad day.
And 90% of people suffering from mental challenges like this are allowed to do so in private, in the shadows. Whereas imagine how it exacerbates the situation. If you're dealing with this and you're rich and you're famous and you're on a team and you're expected to answer these questions, why are you missing 2 games? Well, it's none of your business. I would guess that just increases the burden on you if you're a celebrity or an athlete.
I believe there are a whole lot of people listening to this right now. Soft. The lot of you. All of you. Soft. America's gone
The lot of you.
soft. America's gone soft. You're out here pressuring Lane Johnson and Jimmy Johnson and Jay Glazer to talk about stuff. Soft. And Jimmy Johnson's not allowed to have a contrary opinion. Jimmy Johnson's not allowed after the Lane Johnson interview when
Right.
Jimmy Johnson's not allowed to say, you know what, bleep off all of you. I
Right.
would have ridden you all into the ground in pursuit of my titles.
Yeah.
It's much braver to come out with your mental health struggles to the world than to sit on Twitter behind an egg avatar and call people soft.
Jimmy Johnson, have this conversation with him when he was making one of these Super Bowl runs. Hey, Michael Irvin, what, you can't play for a couple of games? Yeah, Michael Irvin, what's wrong with you? Anything physically?
Right. Give John Gruden truth serum on this topic. See
Give a
what he
whole
thinks.
lot of people in that sport truth
Most
I
of
don't
serum.
want to give
coaches,
John
yeah.
Gruden any more truth serum.
Right.